My phone buzzed at 6:47 in the morning, and I remember thinking it was just another notification, probably a work email or something trivial that could wait until after my coffee. I was sitting in my kitchen in our modest three-bedroom home in suburban Ohio, watching the sun creep over the neighbor's fence, and I was thinking about the presentation I had to give at work that day. I'd been a marketing director at a mid-sized pharmaceutical firm for almost 12 years, and I'd worked my way up from entry-level through sheer determination and careful financial planning. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, though most people who know me well just call me Becca, and at 48 years old, I thought I had my life figured out. I thought I had built something solid, something that couldn't be taken away from me. I thought I understood my family, even when they confused me. I thought I knew my mother. That phone buzzing at 6:47 in the morning was going to change everything. When I swiped my screen open, it was a banking alert. My first instinct was relief because alerts usually meant some small transaction had gone through, perhaps a subscription renewing or a restaurant charge I'd forgotten about. But then I read the message. An international wire transfer of $47,000 had been initiated from my account. My breath caught in my throat, and I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. $47,000. Gone. Not in my account anymore. Not sitting in the savings I had meticulously built over nearly 2 decades of responsible financial management. Gone to somewhere I didn't authorize. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to Olive Revenge Stories, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. I remember standing up so quickly that my coffee mug crashed onto the tile floor, shattering into pieces that scattered everywhere like my composure was scattering at that exact moment. My hands were shaking as I immediately called my bank, my voice probably sounding hysterical to the poor customer service representative who answered. Within 30 minutes, I learned the horrifying truth. My mother, Patricia Henderson Mitchell, had used a power of attorney document I had given her years ago when my father had a health scare, thinking I might need help managing his affairs if things went south. I had never thought she would use it. I had never imagined she would abuse it. The bank told me that this wasn't even the first transaction. There had been 3 others in the past 2 weeks, each one smaller. Each one carefully designed to fly under the radar, to avoid triggering certain fraud alerts. In total, she had drained $53,000 from my account. $53,000. My entire emergency fund. The nest egg I had been building since I was in my 20s. Everything I had set aside for a future I hadn't even fully planned yet. All of it gone. To understand how we got to this moment, you need to understand my family. We weren't wealthy. We were solidly middle class, the kind of family that valued hard work and made sacrifices so our kids could have opportunities. My father, Thomas, had worked at a manufacturing plant for 40 years. He was a quiet man, steady and reliable, the kind of man who showed love through consistency rather than grand gestures. My mother, Patricia, was a former elementary school teacher who had left work when I was born and never really went back in any substantial way. She did some tutoring on the side, some volunteer work at the church, and she seemed perfectly content orchestrating everyone's lives from the center of the family web. My brother, David, was 4 years younger than me. David was charming in a way I never was. He had the kind of easy smile that made people want to help him, and he had discovered early on that he could use that charm to get what he wanted. While I was studious and careful, working summer jobs since I was 14 and never asking for much, David coasted. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our mother's eyes, and as we grew older, this pattern only intensified. I don't think my mother did it on purpose, not exactly. I think she genuinely believed that David was special, that he just hadn't found his path yet, that he needed more support and encouragement while the rest of us needed to pull ourselves up. When David failed out of college, it was my fault for not helping him enough with his classes. When he got fired from his first job, it was because his boss was threatened by his potential. When he struggled with his finances, well, that was simply because nobody had given him a fair chance. Meanwhile, My accomplishments were met with a kind of casual indifference, as if I had simply done what was expected, and there was nothing particularly noteworthy about that. I was the responsible one. I was the one who had her life together. I didn't need help because I didn't ask for it, and more than that, I wasn't interesting in the way David was interesting. He was a problem to be solved. I was just there. The brother situation had reached a critical point about 6 months before that terrible morning when my bank account was drained. David had gotten involved with some people who had loaned him money, and the debts had spiraled out of control. $25,000 was what he owed, and these were not the kind of people who accepted payment plans or sympathetic excuses. My mother had called me in a panic, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before, and she asked me to bail him out. She didn't ask nicely. She didn't appeal to my sisterly love or family loyalty. She told me I had to do it. She told me that if I didn't, David's life would be ruined, that these men were dangerous, that as the responsible older sister and the one with actual money, it was my obligation to fix this. I said no. I remember sitting in my car outside my office building, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and I said no. I told her that David was an adult and that he needed to face the consequences of his choices. I told her that enabling him with bailouts would only teach him that his actions didn't matter because someone would always rescue him. I told her that I had worked too hard for my money and that I wasn't going to hand it over to pay for his irresponsible decisions. She didn't understand. She told me I was selfish. She told me I was cold-hearted. She told me that a real sister, a real daughter who cared about family, would find a way to help. She hung up on me, and I remember sitting there in that car thinking that I was doing the right thing. I was holding a boundary. I was refusing to be a doormat. I was saying no to something that was fundamentally not my responsibility. I felt strong in that moment, even though my hands were still shaking. I didn't know that saying no to my mother was going to cost me everything. The fraud team at my bank moved quickly, and within a few hours, I learned more details about the transactions. My mother had set up a secondary account in my name, and she had transferred the money there first before sending it internationally. She had then tried to cover her tracks by using a mail forwarding service to intercept the account statements. She had created fake documentation that looked like my signature. She hadn't done this in a moment of desperation or emotional manipulation gone too far. She had planned it. She had executed it carefully. She had tried to conceal it. The bank froze everything while an investigation began, and I sat in my living room staring at nothing for what felt like hours. This was my mother. This woman who had taught me to be honest, to work hard, to always do the right thing. This woman who had raised me with lectures about integrity and consequences. This woman had committed federal fraud against her own daughter. When I finally called her, my voice was so cold, I barely recognized it as my own. I asked her directly why she did it. She didn't deny it immediately. Instead, she got defensive. She told me that I had left David no choice. She told me that by refusing to help, I had forced her hand. She told me that she was his mother, and it was her job to protect him. She told me that I was being cruel and vindictive by trying to get her in trouble with the law. The conversation was surreal. She was justifying stealing $53,000 from me by blaming me for not giving it to her willingly. She was reframing her crime as an act of maternal love. She was the victim in her own narrative, and I was the villain for not understanding her perspective. I hung up on her, and I didn't pick up when she called back. I don't think she really understood what she had done, which somehow made it worse. She didn't see it as theft or fraud. She saw it as taking from one of her children to help another. She saw it as her right as a mother to redistribute family resources as she deemed necessary. She saw my money as family money, and family money should be used to help family members, especially the ones who weren't as capable as managing their own lives. My father was devastated when he found out. He had loved my mother for 52 years, and in one moment, that love became complicated and confused. He apologized to me in a way that wasn't his responsibility. He cried in my kitchen while I made him tea, and he kept saying that he never would have known she was capable of something like this. She had hidden it from him too, which somehow was even worse. She had conspired behind his back to steal from their daughter. The police got involved, and the detective assigned to the case was a woman named Susan Blackwell, who had this way of looking at things that cut through all the emotional noise and saw only facts. She explained the charges to me in her office, a small cluttered room that smelled like cold coffee and old filing cabinets. Wire fraud, identity fraud, unauthorized use of a power of attorney, money laundering. The list kept going. Susan told me that my mother could face serious federal prison time, and I remember thinking that I should feel satisfied to hear that, but all I felt was empty. I didn't want my mother in prison. I wanted my life back. I wanted my money back. I wanted my family to not be destroyed by this. Prison wouldn't give me any of those things. The media got wind of the story, and suddenly my private nightmare became public entertainment. Local news stations called my house. Online websites published articles with sensationalized headlines about the mother who betrayed her daughter. People who'd never met me had strong opinions about what should happen to my mother, about what my mother's motivations were, about what kind of daughter I must be. Someone started a GoFundMe page that claimed to be raising money to help me, and I had to have it taken down because it wasn't legitimate. I received emails from strangers telling me they had similar family situations and asking for advice, as if I had somehow become an expert in family betrayal. My coworkers knew, which meant everyone knew, and I had to sit through awkward conversations where people didn't know whether to pity me or judge me for being the kind of person whose mother would steal from her. The legal process was grueling and slow and incremental. Months dragged on. Discovery happened, where I had to read through emails my mother had written, texts she had sent, planning documents she had created. I had to sit in a courtroom and watch her plead not guilty, even though the evidence was overwhelming. Her attorney tried to paint her as a desperate mother who had made a mistake in a moment of crisis, someone who needed help and compassion, not punishment. But the facts were the facts. She had stolen federal funds. She had committed identity fraud. She had planned it carefully. She had tried to cover it up. The judge wasn't sympathetic. In the end, my mother was convicted on 4 of the 5 charges and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. She appealed twice, and both appeals were denied. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like justice was served. Instead, I felt like I was watching my family burn down from the inside out. My father aged 10 years in the months following the conviction. He visited my mother in prison for the first time and came home looking hollow, like something essential inside him had been removed. My brother, shockingly, seemed mostly unaffected. He moved to Colorado, changed his phone number, and started fresh with the knowledge that he wasn't going to be held accountable for his role in any of this. I never heard from him again, though I saw on Facebook years later that he had gotten married and had kids and was apparently living a perfectly normal life. I never got all my money back. The bank recovered some of it, but there was fraud insurance that only covered a portion, and the rest simply vanished into the system. $53,000 that I had worked decades to accumulate, gone. I had to adjust my retirement plans. I had to take on additional work. I had to accept that this was my life now. This was part of my story. What surprised me most, though, wasn't the pain or the betrayal or the financial loss. It was the realization that I had been naive in ways I didn't even know I was being naive. I had believed that certain people were safe to trust. I had believed that family meant something that superseded selfishness and greed. I had believed that my boundaries would be respected because I thought I had been clear about them. I was wrong about all of it. My mother didn't respect my boundaries. She bulldozed them. She rationalized her actions. She convinced herself that she was justified. And even now, years later, I'm not sure she truly understands what she did to me, to my father, to our entire family dynamic. I had to rebuild everything from that point. I had to rebuild my finances. I had to rebuild my relationship with my father, which had become strained because he blamed himself for not knowing what my mother was doing. I had to rebuild my sense of security and safety in the world. I had to accept that people I loved were capable of hurting me in ways I never expected. This process, I learned, takes much longer than you'd think. There were nights I would lie awake calculating what that $53,000 could have meant for my future. A house down payment, a sabbatical from work, a safety net for an unexpected medical emergency. All of it stolen. All of it gone. But here's what I learned through this entire ordeal. I learned that my responsibility for my brother's debt was never actually mine to begin with, and by refusing to pay it, I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. I was telling the truth about what I could and couldn't do. The problem was that my mother couldn't accept that truth. She couldn't accept that her daughter was allowed to have boundaries and expectations and needs that didn't revolve around helping her son. She couldn't accept that sometimes people have to face the consequences of their own choices. She couldn't accept that I was my own person with my own life, and not just an extension of her family system designed to serve everyone else's needs. In many ways, that's the real theft that happened. The money was just the symptom. The real crime was the violation of trust, the betrayal of a relationship I thought was foundational and safe, the moment when I realized that my own mother saw me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be loved. That realization has stuck with me. It changed how I trust people. It changed how I approach relationships. It changed how I think about family and obligation and love. I don't think my mother is a bad person, if I'm being honest. I think she's a person who loved her son so much that she lost perspective. I think she convinced herself that the end justified the means. I think she rationalized her actions until she believed her own justifications. I think she prioritized his problems over my well-being, and when I tried to enforce a healthy boundary, she saw it as a personal attack rather than a statement of self-preservation. This doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it, at least to me. She's in prison now, serving her sentence, and my father visits her every month even though he's aging and driving becomes harder for him. I haven't visited her. I don't know if I ever will. My father tells me that she asks about me, that she wants me to forgive her, that she regrets everything. Maybe that's true. Maybe she really does feel remorse. But forgiveness, I've learned, isn't something you owe someone just because they're family. Forgiveness is something you give when you're ready, if you're ever ready. And I'm not ready. I may never be ready. The financial losses were significant, but the emotional losses were so much more profound. I lost a version of my mother in my mind, the version I thought she was. I lost some of my innocence about the world. I lost years to recovering from this trauma. The money would have been nice to have back. The time would have been nice not to lose. But if I'm honest, I don't think I would take it back and choose a different path, because this path, as painful as it's been, has taught me things about myself that I needed to know. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I've learned that I can survive betrayal and keep moving forward. I've learned that boundaries aren't selfish, even if people accuse you of being selfish for having them. I've learned that family is complicated and people are capable of surprising you in ways you never imagined. I've learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no, even when the cost is high. Especially when the cost is high. If you've made it this far in my story, I want to thank you. Sharing this has been difficult, and knowing that people are listening, that this story isn't just trapped inside me anymore, that it might resonate with someone who's facing a similar situation, makes it easier to talk about. If you're watching this and you're dealing with family betrayal or financial abuse or someone using power of attorney against you, please know that you're not alone. Please know that it's not your fault. Please know that saying no to family members, even when they're desperate and hurting, isn't cruel. It's necessary. It's healthy. It's sometimes the only way you can survive with your own integrity intact. Before you go, I'd love to know your thoughts. What do you think really happened between my mother and brother? Do you think she genuinely believed she was justified, or was this premeditated exploitation? Have you ever had to say no to family, even when the pressure to give in was overwhelming? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories matter to me. Please like this video if it resonated with you. Please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And most importantly, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. There are so many more stories like this one, stories of people who've survived betrayal and are brave enough to share them. These are the stories that need to be told. These are the stories that shouldn't stay silent.